So my name was already introduced. I'm not going to read out loud from the presentation because everybody can read for themselves. But I will say that from a personal perspective, entering both before COVID-19, into COVID-19, and after COVID-19, it was, I have quite many years of experience within supply chain and different types of disruptions, as Madhava was also presenting. You have all of these different disruptions. So I think COVID-19 was a different disruption, but as a disruption for supply chain, it was not a new thing, it was just different. And I do agree with my colleagues that for the future, it's a new normal, and let's adapt ourselves to this new normal. If I move into just shortly, so what is normal life as we perceived it before COVID-19? So a little bit of a history trip from a producer's perspective. If we look at 2011, going way back here, but Carlsberg had organizations sitting locally into the different markets. So they had breweries, they had commercial organizations, they had HR, finance, and so forth, sitting in each and every market. In 2011, we decided for our supply chain to change our setup, consolidate and centralize supply chain, governed out of one location. So instead of having these, let's simplify and say, instead of having 18 different countries with 18 different breweries, we wanted to have kind of one brewery for 18 countries thinking behind it. So we consolidated our procurement, we consolidated our production and our planning, our customer supply chain, and we put a lot of our people into one location in Switzerland. And from there, we've been running our supply chain. By doing that, we also had to change a significant part of our ERP system, which is SAP. So we changed our ERP system to take care of our new governance structure, which was a huge task. And I think what we heard from my colleagues, these technology changes should not be taken lightly. So it took a long time. What also comes with that comes a lot of restrictions. So if I come back to what we heard in the Lamasoft presentation, when you do these ERP systems and you come to these restrictions, these disruptions start to be less AI driven and much more Excel spreadsheet driven. And I'll come back to this part, but you come from thinking that you're very modernized and you understand throughout the periods that you're not so modernized as you should be. So that's one thing behind it. And then secondly, what I also would like to share with this slide we're looking at here, if you look at the lower right corner, you will actually see we have what's supposed to be at least a wide portfolio range. So this discussion my colleagues was discussing about, is it going to have more SKUs, less SKUs? From prehistoric at least, so before COVID, the SKU range was enormous. And one of the mechanisms to growth was always launching NPD, so new products to the market, because the consumer wants something new and special and crafty, and we thought we were going to supply all of that. So that was kind of our life, normal life before COVID. If we then go a little bit into, so what actually happened around February, March or so when COVID started to hit, of course, first in Asia, one of our real biggest regions, and then coming slowly to Western Europe, hitting Italy, and then start to cascade into all the other markets. We understand that our operating model in terms of crisis was not really catering for this type of crisis where you could not travel, you could not meet physically, and you will also start to have some border constraints with your goods, driven by truck drivers. So truck drivers coming from Italy to Hungary started to be a problem because of quarantine rules. So all of this changed a huge perspective on how to operate. So one of the things which is fitting very nicely into what Lamasoft was telling us about the S&OP process. In Carlsberg, we have spent a lot of time maturing ourselves into the S&OP process. So as you can see in far left of the slide, you will see this fancy diagram, not so fancy as the slide we saw from my colleagues, but the S&OP diagram, which has 4 elements in it, and very correctly start with the demand, and then go through all the areas of the business, and then they end up in the sales and operation planning meeting. This was a monthly cycle where week 1 had one meeting, week 2 had another meeting. As soon as we came into COVID-19, we understood that these monthly S&OP and with an 18 months planning horizon, measuring on months -3 was absolutely crap. Sorry for being transparent, but all our forecasting accuracy was simply down the drain. And our inventory increased significantly. So from a service perspective, we had high OTIF, we had high SSL, but it came with an enormous inventory cost. So we had to reshuffle, and then we went to week -4, forecasting focus and still. But even with that, we were still off because simply the pattern from retailers had changed significantly, and from on-trade, more or less non-existent in most of our markets. So from this, we changed our S&OP. Then what we also did was we actually, and you'll see that in the middle of the slide, we started to go into this not so artificial intelligence world and a lot Excel driven on how to control, with the traffic lights. We started to work with bi-daily, bi-weekly status calls with the countries, not to micromanagement, but to make sure we could offer the right support from a distance. And what we did was we moved a lot of the decision making away from us guys in the central team and to our directors in the local teams. So on a daily basis, the local management team would meet, and they would practically have a, let's call it mini S&OP on a daily basis, but also a health and safety discussion, how to cater for our people. And in case there would be more restrictions, because some countries had very big restrictions, how to handle that from a production perspective, how to handle it from a supply chain perspective, and make sure we could still manage our customers who still need to make a living. So that was part of what we did. What we also experienced through all of this, with no surprise, of course, was since on-trade was closing down, we had a lot of returns, lots of returns back from on-trade, which came back into our already increased inventory. So we also had to start renting more external warehouses for all our goods in the first time of the COVID, before we started to simply downscale our business and our production, and we started to send home our shifts in production as well, in order to minimize our production. And what I'm trying to illustrate with the bottom part of the slide is that the range of SKUs started to decrease. So having this big range you saw on the previous slide, we went down to a much smaller range of SKUs. So I think Philip was talking a lot about how SKUs will grow. I think Martin talked more about how they were shrinking, and I think they're both right. What does it mean? Amazon have a wide range of products, but from different producing companies. So as a producer, I see that we produce fewer SKUs with more volume or more appetite for the customers, instead of constantly just broaden it. Because what we saw under COVID was, as soon as the crisis hit, on-trade closed down, and the retailers were supposed to supply to the home market for beverages. It was more, the simple products So the big runners, not so sophisticated products, which was moving the most. So this was how we managed during COVID. So we reduced the number of shifts, we slimmed down our product portfolio, and we increased the sequence of our S&OP process. If I go into a little bit about the key learnings for the future, and probably fitting into the LlamaSoft presentation as well, on the tool support needed, there's a few things I would like to highlight through all of this for many companies, and Carlsberg is no special. For us, it was a lot about keeping health and safety for our people. So we spent a lot of time, energy, resources, and that's what you will see in the first picture to the left. You will see some sanitizing, you will see some masks, you will see a reception covered in glass. So the first step was, before anything else, let's secure our employees. And we are continuing that in our new normal, to use that phrase. So we are still doing all of that, and we're still sanitizing all the handles, all the rails at the staircases, specific rules on how many people in the elevators and so on. So this is some of the learnings, and we are keeping that, because if it's not COVID, then it'll be something else in the long term. What we need for the future, we need, if we look at forecasting accuracy, we need more flexibility on our long-term horizon. So some algorithms into the tools which can have this adaptation to what LlamaSoft was showing us with all these different disruptions. These different disruptions have some patterns. Let's try to be better at building them into our tools. So when we do long-term, there is this historical patterns of disruptions incorporated into our forecasting. So our commercial people will do the forecasting, and the tool will correct it based on a prediction of disruption. And then for our short-term planning, we need a much more dynamic setup, both from a tool perspective, but also from a core operation perspective. And then I believe, or I hope, as being a supply chain, of course, so that's my angle to it, but I hope that we have learned together with my commercial colleagues that the way to success is not necessarily to keep increasing your portfolio. I'm not talking about not having a new product. We should have new products, but every time we take something new in, something old new should go out. So a 1-to-1 ratio, so we're driving with the right SKUs for our business. I think that all of those elements together will give us, what I'm trying to say, in the lower left corner, a more efficient and optimized customer balanced supply chain. Because I'm sometimes a little bit afraid that us supply chain people, we have a tendency of looking at OEE, efficiency, big batches and everything, which does not necessarily suit the need for the end customer, so the consumer. And we need to be better at aligning that together. And to come to that, I believe supply chain needs to be much more alongside commercial when it comes to customer integration. I think the demand forecasting needs much more artificial intelligence based on what I talked about before, the learnings from disruptions. I believe we should have much more focus on forecast accuracy, also as I tried to explain before with the tool support. And therefore having this artificial intelligence integrated into the forecasting. I believe we should have more SKU value track and not only volume track, and be better at it, because today in Carlsberg we have both. We're just not very good at it, because as soon as it doesn't fit, then it's a strategic project. And as soon as it's a strategic product, this value and volume goes out of the equation. And then I think we should work much more with pre-stock modeling to cater for these disruptions. What kind of elements should we start to pre-stock? What kind of SKUs do we know for sure is always a sure thing to go out to the market? And then I believe much more in SKU harmonization. So much more we have the same SKUs across the market and become less cross-border dependent. So I think that's a little bit my take on it. So a little bit of history. How was it in the crisis? And what did we learn from that? And a little bit about the future from a Carlsberg perspective. So I would not take the mouthful and call it best practice. I would just call it a Carlsberg experience to share with you guys. So that was what I had. I don't know if that leads to any questions. I'll be fine to take those.